Hello, Trombone Internet. This is Chris Van Hoff, assistant to the regional manager of the International Trombone Festival. We at the festival, of course, are huge fans of the pod, and we are really excited to invite you to attend this year's 2024 International Trombone Festival at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. Dave Begnosh is our host. We have the world premiere of a brand new double concerto for trombone and piano with the Fort Worth Symphony. We have the American Brass Quintet. We have late night jazz featuring a Latin jam session. Like, everything is happening. All the cast will be there. It's the best hang in the world, and we hope to see you there. You can register for the festival still online at www.internationaltrombonefestival.com, and it's happening the last week of May. So go register. We'll see you in Texas.
Welcome to the Trombone Retreat, a podcast of the Third Coast Trombone Retreat. Today on the podcast, we talk to David Binder, second trombonist of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. My name is Sebastian Vera, and I'm joined as always by Nick Schwartz. Nick, could I do our first official shout-out, at least my first official shout-out?
You go for it. You do you.
I don't even know if you're aware of this. I don't know if I've told you this yet, but I was checking out some of the stats of our last episode, and keep in mind, we've only put out 11 so far. I guess this is number 12. The last episode was listened to in 33 countries.
There's that many countries?
There's at least 33.
Wow.
I know that now. And we got such amazing feedback from Amanda Stewart's episode and such thoughtful feedback of talking about anxiety. And I just have to say, like, this podcast has been therapy for me in a lot of ways too, and it's been a wonderful project during this time, and the fact that so many people are supporting it just means the world, and it really helps us feel like there's a real community for this,
especially during this time. You know, when we had this idea, you know, we started thinking about this probably about 2 years ago, I would say, but we certainly didn't expect this to happen. And you know, a bulk of our episodes have been recorded during the pandemic, and I think for not just for ourselves or our listeners, but also for our guests, I think it's been really great to have an outlet to talk about things going on, or in some cases not going on. And yeah, so it's been fun.
So we see you Germany, we see you Canada, England, I guess the UK in general, Australia, Norway, Mexico, Sweden, just to name a few. We're going to be talking to some international trombonists soon. We call them international if they're not in America, international to us. But we're also happy to announce a new official schedule for the podcast. We will now have a new episode bi-weekly every Monday morning. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you download your podcast, and you can expect an episode every Monday.
Mondays won't be so dreary anymore, Sebastian, because you'll have the Trombone Retreat.
That's right. This episode of the Trombone Retreat is also brought to you by Houghton Horns. Houghton Horns deals Shires, Bach, Yamaha, Courtois, Greg Black, and is the exclusive U.S. dealer for Tyne instruments.
They have a recently updated selection of Shires components, and you can also browse vintage and consignment trombones on their site.
Have a free in-person or virtual equipment consultation with their team of professional musicians. There's a 15-day money-back guarantee with free shipping and returns on new trombones and mouthpieces, as well as multiple easy financing options on all inventory.
Special offer to Trombone Retreat podcast listeners. Enter the promo code RETREAT1020 at checkout to receive $300 off your purchase of a new trombone from houghtonhorns.com.
Enjoy our talk with David Binder. I mean, that can get in the way sometimes.
But then we got to hear the Moonraker laser again, so it was worth it.
That's how you're excited when the podcast starts. You get that pew!
Pop, pop, pop.
Very excited.
Come on, you guys played GoldenEye, right?
Oh, yeah.
Dude.
Oh, but wasn't the Moonraker like the worst gun?
Only in multiplayer.
That was like a crappy gun, wasn't it?
It wasn't very lethal, but it was a laser, so it was cool.
Did you have a favorite character to use?
Oh, I always use the scientists.
Oh yeah, the scientists are good, man.
No,
I don't know why that seems so fitting.
I was always the anonymous, like, civilian 3, scientist 2.
I'm gonna figure out some secret formula to kill everyone.
No, I just thought it was funny running around as a nobody.
My favorite thing to do on that game after you've been playing for hours with friends would be to change it to License to Kill, right? So like the second you touch someone, they die. And what was it? Slappers only. Like, so no guns. And so you're just running around to try to hit people. And once you get really close and you and your friend are trying to fight.
I know the type of people that like slappers only. And it's not, I usually don't join those games.
Wow. Well, you wouldn't have been invited to my sleepover.
How do I sound, gentlemen?
Sounds pretty
Sound
good.
okay.
Oh.
Nick knows that I like the bass tones in his voice, so when he gets too far away from the mic, you lose the bass tones.
I can get right in there like that.
I mean,
I was explaining to
Doesn't that sound
everyone
good?
the Howard Stern voice.
that sounds. I like both of that.
Well, you got to get as close as possible for that bass boost.
If I did that, I got to go right in my ISO booth like that.
You
Then you can't see me. How does that look?
Well, we already discussed that we're not using any video, so it's okay.
You're like the podcast version of Sia.
I'm gonna swim from a chandelier.
Maybe split the difference, and I think it's good.
I was gonna say, you guys talking about Goldeneye. I can almost taste the pizza rolls.
Oh, were you a pizza roll guy for your sleepovers?
Or bagel bites.
Bagel bites.
Bagel bites.
Bagel
pretty
bites
good.
were good.
Anything pizza themed?
Oh, pizza in the morning, pizza in the evening, pizza at supper time. When pizza's on a bagel, you can have pizza anytime. Yep.
This is that rock. It had a bit of rock and roll in it.
See, David, I imagine you grew up on like kale chips or something. You just feel like
Dude,
kale
there were no
chips
kale chips in the 90s. No, I was thinking about never mind.
No, please.
I think some of your intervals were off.
My God, dude.
It was
Okay.
perfect. It was a really nice major arpeggio at the time. Pizza in the morning, pizza in the evening, pizza at supper time. It's like what you sang. It sounded nice.
What did I mean? Do you want to do like Schenkerian analysis over my Totino's pizza or what? No, it's our bagel bites.
Pizza's on a bagel. You can have pizza anytime.
See, I feel like maybe your pitch was more correct, David, but your diction and the overall mood of the commercial.
Oh, well, I'm a very
accurate.
I truly am a poor singer for some reason. I have a hard time controlling my voice. Very bad pitch.
But what about emotion? See, I got the pizza in the
That's some Bob Seger right there.
Hey, Michigan, dude.
I know, man. That's why I brought it up. Hey, Eddie Van Halen. I didn't know he was from Grand Rapids.
Was he really?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Ted Nugent. He goes on and on, man.
Yeah, we'd forget about him.
Hey, David.
Yes?
Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Nick.
You did it again. Oh, I see. It's a joke. I see.
Yeah.
Well, we met previously, and I said, "Good to see you, David," and he said, "Oh, good to see you, Nick." And I was deeply hurt. But then I realized it's classic. It was a classic David Bender jab, purposeful jab. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's good to have someone that we both know really well. It's going to be really cool to talk even more about some things we don't know about each other. As Nick and I always talk about, there's a certain level of getting to know someone, hanging out and playing together and drinking or whatever. But yeah, this is deep dive David Bender time. I always associate you as being from around the Chicago area. Did you always grow up there?
Yeah, I was born in Evanston.
Lifer.
So yeah, I was a Cook County lifer for 22 years. So I was born in Evanston and lived there, with my parents until I was about 7, I think. Then moved to a town called Glencoe at the north part of Cook County, and then until I was 18, then moved back to Evanston for Northwestern.
So you're about as Midwest as you can be.
I'm about as Chicago suburbs
Midwest
as you can be.
There's so many nuances of Midwest.
Yeah, there's lots of debates, but
Are you only child?
no, I have an older sister.
What does she do?
She is in digital marketing right now. She's a freelancer.
Oh, very cool. And your parents, and I could be completely wrong. I'm just checking my random memory. Are your parents academics, or did I make that up?
No, my dad works inside a building in Carnegie Mellon,
Oh,
but he does
okay.
not work for Carnegie Mellon in that way. But he works for a U.S. government entity essentially called the Software Research Institute, which is administered by Carnegie Mellon, but he's not teaching in that way. But he's a software engineer. That's why he moved to Pittsburgh.
And he was doing that your whole life?
Yeah.
Cool. Mom's doing?
My mom is a researcher. When I was growing up, she worked for McKinsey and Company, which is a consulting firm, doing primary research. For a long time now, almost 15 years, she's also been kind of freelancing, doing primary research, mostly for consulting firms for competitive business analysis.
So you grew up with some pretty smart parents. So what kind of, did anyone in your family have any sort of musical inclinations?
No, not really. I mean, I think my dad was like a fan of music, but I wouldn't say, I mean, let's just say that we had like 5 CDs in the house that he would pull out on Christmas or like a holiday, and it was like the Nigel Kennedy Four Seasons and like Best of Beethoven and a flamenco guitar CD.
Oh, wow.
So, and he liked Steely Dan. I guess that's the one thing I got from him.
The flamenco is for those crazy nights where you invite friends over for wine.
Exactly. But actually, my sister and I can still sing the first track from that CD because we listen to it so often.
Is there any way we could set up you guys singing that and we could layer it into the podcast?
Dun 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 dun.
We need your sister's line, though.
I thought that would have taken some coaxing, but he was just like right into it.
Yeah, that was loaded right in the hopper, just straight in there.
It's like, I thought you'd never ask.
It's always playing.
Just that night, I can imagine you laying in bed, putting pillows over both your ears, like, make it stop.
So, yeah, I mean, people ask, I would not consider myself from a musical family. It just wasn't a big thing. And like my parents, bless their hearts. Actually, they're huge supporters of the Pittsburgh Symphony now. But at the time, I would not consider them like music lovers. You know what I mean?
So you kind of developed that on your own.
Yeah.
When did you start really just getting into music? Were there certain things you liked listening to growing up?
It's probably like in middle school, like 12, 13. I really started getting into the Grateful Dead and Fish. And I was a big jam band fan. Nick learned this just a few days ago.
Yeah, so I was down there and I looked at your CD collection and I was like, "Ooh, I have this Fish CD. It's a 94 New Year's Eve concert live from Madison Square Garden. Is that right?"
Yeah.
They usually do New Year's Eve at Madison Square Garden because I grew up as a big Fish fan too. Right. So we realized that our hearts are even more connected than they once were.
Intertwined.
They are. Like Avatar, the Avatar tail and the dragon thing. Let's push on.
People listening at home, you should have a drinking game for the awkward pauses after we make David uncomfortable.
It's not that you make me uncomfortable. It's that I could have a comeback, but you guys give me so much shit for being a know-it-all or whatever that I like hold it in.
But that's what we love about you.
No, I don't want you to hold it. This is no holds barred.
I'm barring my hold right now.
Give it 5 minutes. So you start listening to that, and then band comes around, trombone comes around. When did just the thought of like this could be something I could do as a major in school, something that I could do this in college? Like when did that kind of thing happen?
Yeah, well, that was probably more like I was a sophomore or junior in high school, and I was really lucky to go to a public high school with a really strong music program. It was a large high school. It was like 4,000 students. So there were 4 bands, 4 orchestras, 4 jazz bands, 4 choirs, but I was not in any choirs. So it was a really strong high school music program. I can think about some of the students, just again, it was a public school. It wasn't like a performing arts magnet. I think from the few grades above me, few grades below me, like 10 people in professional orchestras.
Wow.
What high school was this? Because I know the area a little bit.
New Trier High School in the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I have a couple cousins who teach and taught out in the suburbs. And
also I was in some great youth orchestras. And like when I was joining my youth orchestra, Ethan Bensdorf had just left.
For those who don't know, Ethan is a trumpet player in the New York Philharmonic.
Right. Ethan, I think, is from Evanston. And I know that he studied trumpet with my assistant band director from my high school, who was a really great trumpet player. So it was just like a pretty high level, like all around. And it seemed like kind of normal. I didn't realize that it wasn't normal. So I knew a lot of graduating seniors when I was a freshman or sophomore that were going into music. So it just seemed like a normal, typical thing to do. If you're in a huge school and you have 100 seniors in band, you're going to have people that are going to music already. So
yeah, because that sounds like a bigger program than a lot of colleges, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but I know that it was like 4,000 for the total enrollment and one band, orchestra, and jazz band for each grade, essentially.
That's great. And so I imagine you're checking out the Chicago Symphony from a young age, being that close. Do you remember your first experience hearing that section?
Yeah, I can't remember my first, like what concert was it? I don't remember my first time hearing the CSO, but I definitely remember by about my sophomore year, I was going pretty frequently, like probably once every maybe 6 to 8 weeks, like as a high schooler. And then probably by my senior year, I actually became friends with Jesse Clevenger, who's Dale Clevenger's son, who was going to my high school, because Dale Clevenger lived like four doors down from where my high school was. So I became friends with him, and then we would go like maybe every 2 weeks when I was a senior.
Hook you up with some free tickets, I imagine.
Sometimes we didn't have tickets and we had to sneak in, but it was a simpler time back then.
So was it always Northwestern was the place that you wanted to go to school, or did you have other aspirations, or was it just again on this like continuous path?
Northwestern was one of my top choices. I mean, I didn't apply to very many schools. I only applied to 6.
That's a lot.
Okay. I've one of my students last year wants to apply to 12, and I'm like,
it's growing. It's different now. People apply to a lot more schools now.
Yeah, I mean, do you really want to go to those other 5 that aren't the first 5? That's my opinion. But
I'm thinking this year, since it's pandemic and a lot of schools aren't doing things in person, so you're going to save a lot of money from traveling and having to do live auditions.
Sure.
I could see a lot of people doubling how many places.
Well, I remember when I was applying, the Common app was like just getting started, so people were like applying to a lot more than maybe they would otherwise. Anyway, Northwestern, it was one of my top choices because of Michael Mulcahy. Growing up in Chicago, my teachers. I had one kind of main teacher in high school. His name was Mark Fry, and he's really plugged into the Chicago freelance scene. So through his recommendation, I was taking lessons with Michael Mulcahy and Jay Friedman and Charlie Vernon once in a while, like maybe once a year. I knew the reputation. I knew that in my 1 or 2 lessons, it was like a really eye-opening time. So I thought, okay, like that's one possibility, going to Northwestern. And then I applied to Indiana because I knew it was a great music school also. And I met Pete Ellison, I think through my youth orchestra. And then I also applied to Rice because my teacher, Mark, is from Houston and he'd studied with David Waters. So he thought that Rice was a great place. And then I applied to a few conservatories. I applied to the conservatories like Juilliard in Manhattan and San Francisco.
So I'm just curious, your parents coming from, some tech backgrounds and advanced pursuits, when you came and said, "Hey, I want to go study music," was that a difficult conversation?
It wasn't difficult, but it was a conversation, and I think everyone's different, but for us, it wasn't like one conversation. I think we spoke about, again, my junior year, right? You kind of make some choices when you're a junior in high school in order to apply when you're a senior. So I think we kind of had the conversation throughout that year, and they would ask things like, well, what about this? What about this? And once they realized, and I'm really lucky. My parents are always extremely supportive of me. So once they realized that it was a serious thing, it also was, I wasn't only applying to conservatories, for example, I was applying to universities also. So there was sort of a balance. By the time I was ready to apply to colleges, they were completely on board. I don't think they assumed at that time that I would become a professional musician, but they were on board with me being a music major at, for my undergrad.
Probably helps when you go to a place like Northwestern, because as a parent, it probably makes them feel a lot better knowing that, if the music thing doesn't work out, he's at Northwestern.
Well, it's funny. My dad went to University of Chicago, so it was like rivalry with Northwestern. But my mom went to Northwestern for her master's. So.
Oh, wow.
And actually, my uncle went to Northwestern for his law degree, I think.
Yeah,
Little
go Cats.
Yeah, go Cats. Well, we're from Evanston, so it was always around.
Okay, so you end up going to Northwestern. Can you just walk us through kind of a Reader's Digest version of your experience there?
Well, the first week of my freshman year.
First week, the orientation week of my freshman year, the orientation group was like 12. I don't know if every school does this or Northwestern does this, but all of the trombones were in the same orientation group. There were 5 of us. The orientation group is supposed to be like, a smaller
bunch of
group,
people.
a smaller community than the whole freshman class, right? So you can walk around campus together and like learn about, orientation stuff. But so it's just the trombones. So my first week.
Well, they do that just to contain the smell, really.
Right. Keep the smelly kids together.
Yeah.
So my first week was meeting, my classmates for the next 4 years. Not to joke, but that was, that was what it was.
I feel sorry for those 7 other kids that show up to this orientation group to meet
Honestly,
up.
I think there were some trumpet players in there. They kept it like all the schools together. So
okay.
I don't know anyone from like the engineering program at Northwestern or whatever. Yeah, I enjoyed my whole time there.
You got to study with Mick Mulcahy, and you got to study with...
My freshman year, the teachers were Mulcahy, Charlie Vernon, and Pete Ellefson.
So I can say from the outside that one of the unique things about Northwestern, at least at that time, was that the students, yourself included, got to study with the different teachers. And it was kind of a rotating studio. And we were talking about this the other day, that we've more or less implemented that at the schools I teach at in the New York area. And I think it's a great way to experience school and what all your faculty has to offer. Can you just talk about that experience a little bit, about getting to get all the input of these great professors?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, when I first started, it was only 3. And Charlie, we were kind of told that he was a little more reserved for the bass trombonists, obviously. So really, I was probably, 40% with Mulcahy, 40% with Pete, and 20% with Charlie my freshman year. Of course, we think about Michael Mulcahy being like the main teacher. So I think he's the one that's responsible for bringing in everyone else that's on faculty. And if you look at the people that are on faculty, if you connect the dots, everyone has a mostly similar playing philosophy in terms of explaining pedagogy, what to focus on, what's the most important thing with trombone playing. So that the end goal is the same, but obviously everyone has their own way of explaining it. For example, Michael Mulcahy is very well-spoken, sometimes can explain things very, poetically, loquaciously. Whereas my lessons with Charlie Vernon, it was, okay, I'm going to play it, now you're going to play it, and now make it sound like this. But the make it sound like this is probably the same thing that Michael Mulcahy is trying to explain, right? So to me, it was great. I was able to learn so many things from each teacher that I had that you wouldn't get if you only had one teacher. Maybe there's some things that you do get with one teacher, like consistency, guidance every step of the way, but pros and cons. And I think there are a lot of pros to the way that we did it. So after my freshman year, Charlie left. I think his schedule at DePaul, he had to fully commit to DePaul. So when it was right around the same time as the DSO strike in 2009. So I'm not sure with the dates, if the writing was on the wall, but Randy Hawes started teaching then my sophomore year. And then it was my junior year when Tim Higgins started teaching. So by my senior year, there was Mulcahy, Pete Ellefson, Randy, and Tim.
Just amazing exposure, a lot of great minds great players to hear. I can't even imagine. And the studio was always really strong. Consistently. And I imagine it was Brian Heck there.
Yeah.
Doug Rosenthal when you were there.
Doug had just graduated. It's funny. So Doug was also in my youth orchestra, but we're 4 years apart. So we were always graduating. He was graduating when I was coming up. So we didn't meet until many years later. But because he's
Baker
from,
was there, right?
Yeah, Will Baker was there.
Handsome Will Baker.
A little later. So like Hecht and Will were not together.
So
Brian,
did you have to be generally handsome to go to Northwestern? Because you got the Binder handsome, you got the Hecht handsome, and the Baker handsome.
Prerequisite, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to quickly think of someone that wouldn't care if I called them ugly right now.
Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy's handsome too.
Yeah, Jeremy is
Dang.
handsome. You can't deny.
Yeah.
So Hecht, I remember I played on Brian's master's recital as a freshman.
Nice.
A quartet.
Mm.
In that quartet was me, Brian, Logan Chopik, who's now in San Diego Symphony, and Paul Jenkins, who's now in the Nashville.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so let's just push forward a little bit. And you are taking auditions. I mean, when did that process start, and how long did it take you until you got to the chapter I'm going to talk about, which is overseas?
Yeah, my first audition was was not prepared for properly, as most first ones are not. It was for the Cincinnati Symphony, the time that Sam Schlosser won it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was my junior year, so I didn't have a chance. And I remember at that audition, they had so many applicants that the first round was split in 2 different rooms with 2 different committees.
I hate that.
Well, you're trying to cut through the fat like me. You don't need the whole committee listening.
I understand.
So that I almost don't even count that. So my first audition that I really sat down and like wrote out a plan and prepared for was the Washington National Opera, which Doug Rosenthal won, and that was in January of my senior year. And then a few months later, in May of my senior year, is when the Finnish National Opera audition happened, and that was when I did end up winning that.
Those first 2 audition experiences, how was it mentally? I mean, were you learning a lot from it not working out?
Well, let's just talk about the second one, because the first one I didn't even like practice correctly. Now knowing what I know, I was like, what was I doing? So the first one I just like missed notes and like played wrong. So, but in the second one, the Washington National, that one I really went like by the book. I was reading Don Green's book. I was talking to Tim Higgins about audition preparation, and I did the whole Mike Roylance thing where I slowed everything down to half tempo for like weeks and weeks beforehand. I was still a young player. A senior in your undergrad, it's unusual for someone to be ready to really present a good audition. But I was happy because of the Don Green stuff. I did feel very comfortable. The nervousness that happens in your head, as long as it doesn't affect you physically, then you can still play well. So that's what I was focusing on. Whenever I would play in studio class or something, I sometimes had a problem, with a little bit of shaking or whatever. So I was trying to overcome that, and I think I did. The centering from the Don Green books really worked for me. I was really happy with how I played. I mean, I didn't advance, but I think I played past the cut excerpt. And, for me, I felt okay with how I played, even though I didn't advance, which is totally an okay or a likely outcome when if you feel okay, sometimes you don't advance anyway, but you can still feel okay about it.
Right. After taking so many auditions myself, one of the things I started promising myself is not necessarily the result of winning an audition or advancing or anything like that, but being able to walk away from the experience saying, I went in there, I gave it my all, I prepared as well as I could, and I represented myself well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's almost more important so they can sleep at night,
Yeah. So basically, it was only a few months after that I started getting ready for the audition in Finland. And some of the rep was the same, some maybe 1 or 2 kind of odd excerpts are like Strauss Arabella. Anyone who plays in an opera orchestra, you two play an opera orchestra, so maybe you've played that or know it.
I've never played it, but yeah.
There's a really tricky overture, I think, to the third act, over and over again. So some tricky stuff like that, but I just basically...
It wasn't all Sibelius?
I don't even think there was Sibelius, because Sibelius didn't write any opera.
There's the first one. Actually, that's like the second Bender jab.
That wasn't a jab.
Oh, the way you said it had a tone.
Okay. But so I just continued. I basically just did the same thing as I did for the Washington audition, because I felt like it worked pretty well. Methodical, preparing myself mentally, with the centering.
I imagine it's one of your first auditions. Taking an audition in another country, I'd imagine was an interesting prospect. Was the process there any different than an American audition felt?
Slightly, knowing what I know now. At the time, as it was only my second/third professional audition, I didn't quite know what was normal. So now I know that it's not normal in America, but it's normal in Europe to play the David concerto with a pianist in the first round. And usually you don't have rehearsal, of course, like the pianist is sitting there playing it 50 times. So
it's like tuned to A447.
It was tuned high. I think they tuned to 44 or 43.
Wow.
So just push in all the way and hope for the best. Yeah. Other than that, looking back, it's typical, typical audition stuff after the David happened. There's rounds behind the screen. The final round was a section round.
Yeah,
got it.
David and I could have ended up in the same section in an alternate universe, because I when I was 20, I think, maybe 21, I was runner up for the same job for the Finnish National Opera. That would have been 2005 or something like that.
Yeah, Nick is talking about the bass trombone position. So he was runner up to my colleague, who became my colleague, a Swedish player named Niklas Larsson, who's a great bass trombonist.
How long were you there?
I was there for only 3 seasons. 3 seasons plus I came back for like 6 weeks after taking a year off just to finish out my time.
Nice verb there. Did you catch that? Finish out your time.
Oh.
Nothing? Wow. It's like I'm doing a podcast by myself here.
Exactly. Were you determined the entire time you were in Finland to come back stateside, or were you toying with the idea of being elsewhere in Europe, or were you putting out feelers everywhere? What was the situation with that?
I guess I would say I was putting out feelers everywhere. Being there was a fantastic experience and a great position, and it could have been great for a long time. I think I knew after just about 1 or 2 years that I didn't want to like spend my entire career in Finland. And like,
why not?
There's no baseball. No, seriously though, imagining my life outside of the orchestra, like outside of the job. And like, especially I was long distance with my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time. And I couldn't really imagine, well, I guess I'm kind of a nostalgic person. So I was trying to think about my childhood growing up in Chicago suburbs and what my life would be like, into my like 40s and 50s. And I just thought that I wanted a little bit more of my comfort level of being in the US. Whatever, if that makes me not a adventurous person, but I kind of realized that pretty quickly, that way in the future, I was only 22 or 23, but I was like, you know what, if I was 45, I think I want to move back to the US. And sort of my personality, once I realized that, then I can do it as soon as possible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think moving to another country at 22 for 3 years is very adventurous.
Oh, so, and also to answer Nick's question, at the time, while I was there, I was taking a lot of auditions. I don't remember this number offhand, but I think I took between 10 and 15 auditions in like Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, and Denmark. And then like once a year, I could come back to take an audition in the US. So like I auditioned for the Colorado Symphony that also Sam Schlosser won, and Nashville.
Long trip.
Nashville, where Paul won. I was in the finals with him. It was kind of fun. We actually, every round together, we were right after each other.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I was taking a lot of auditions at that time.
And it seems like you took advantage of your time there. You traveled around and studied with Ian and Jamie Williams also, right?
Yeah, so Ian was in Switzerland, and Jamie Williams is American, but he's the principal trombone in the Deutsche Oper in Berlin.
Who
so
I went to school with, actually.
That's right. He went to Juilliard, I know, in the early 2000s.
Yep.
Yeah, Brad,
yeah, he plays down in Sarasota.
So, yeah, while I was there, I kind of almost think about it looking back as like my fake master's degree, my fake master's studies. So I was playing in the orchestra, I was taking a lot of auditions, and I was trying to go study with people, in Europe that I wouldn't normally get the chance to. I didn't get to everyone that I wanted to, but I went down and played with Ian maybe 2 or 3 times, with Jamie twice. Also took a lesson with Jesper Sorensen in Berlin. But I think, and maybe your listeners who are a little out of school will agree, like once you get a little bit older and you're not taking lessons every week, each lesson becomes a little more important. Or if you take a really informative lesson, like I really like studying with Jamie, because he would explain things really that helped me a lot. And I would listen back to my tapes, and that one lesson could sustain me for like months of practicing, trying to think about these concepts in a really high level. Even though I didn't take so many lessons while I was there, I don't know what I just mentioned, 6, 7, but they were all very consequential to me, and I really took a lot from each individual one.
I imagine it's really cool you took advantage, and you're in Scandinavia, but it's still pretty easy to get around up there, and everything's all these different cultures and amazing talents are close.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone always asked me if I would take the train from like Helsinki to Berlin. I was like, no, I'm not going to swing through like Lithuania. But yeah, the flights, flying from Helsinki to Berlin was just about 2 hours.
Oh,
it's
man.
Simple and pretty inexpensive,
I did want to ask one last Finland question before we left. And I think we briefly talked about this maybe in the past, but How intense was the darkness situation was it in the winters?
Yep, dark in the winters, sunny in the summers. I didn't find it that bad. I think it was a few different reasons, mostly because I was inside all day practicing. So I wasn't like, some of the rooms I was in had windows, some of them didn't have windows. So I almost didn't notice. I didn't notice it being dark at 3 p.m., you know?
Would the sun come out at all?
Yeah.
during this?
So Finland, I mean, Helsinki is the very southern part of the country. It's about even with Alaska, like the Juneau or Anchorage, Alaska. So the sun would come out in the middle of the day, like let's say 11 to 3, but it would be like kind of dusk or daylight or dawn for many hours. When you're that far north, it's not such a quick sunrise and sunset as it is the further south you go. So it was a long time of twilight. So twilight might last like 2 hours.
That's pretty cool.
And then it's like 11 to 3 is full sun, and then it's twilight for 2 hours after that. But the opposite is in the summertime, it's light all day long. So that was actually, I found that more strange than the wintertime because on a lot of people will say this, it like messes up your sleep schedule. So you have to get blackout curtains. When the sun's up at 12:30 p.m. or a.m., sorry, like after midnight, you just don't get as tired. And then the next day you're sleepy, but somehow, you're awake because the sun is up. So that was a little more bizarre to me than the wintertime.
It's like, why am I so tired? And you're like, oh, it's 1 a.m.
It's 1 a.m. It's 1 a.m. and it's twilight outside.
Right. That's cool. So you're taking these auditions around Europe, you're taking auditions in the United States. Then we land at the fateful audition of the Detroit Symphony, which is the orchestra I grew up listening to. Was this like, I think I know the answer, but was it an audition that when it came up, you're like, put everything aside, this is the most important thing on my book right now?
I mean, definitely when I saw it, that, Detroit, the top 10 orchestra. So like I said, I can only, both financially and also like schedule wise, I could really only come back for maybe 1 or 2 auditions in the US a year while I was over there. Right. But very, serendipitously, it was at the end of January, and I don't remember why, but the Finnish National Opera had a week off that week, the whole week. So I didn't even have to take off work.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty lucky. So yeah, I saw it come up, and it was definitely one that I was going to come back for.
And what was your process like? What did you learn at this point compared to, say, when you won the Finnish job, as far as how you went into preparing for this audition?
Funnily enough, my preparation is almost exactly the same as from my Washington National Opera audition way back when I was a senior, because I kind of, through the advice of my teachers, I learned this really good methodical system and, tweaks here and there, it's pretty much the same thing that I do at every audition still, which again,
can you describe that a little?
Yeah, I've called it it's been described to me as something that Mike Roylance came up with. You take a whole list, you divide the list into excerpts that are maybe very technical based, lyrically based, maybe ones that have a lot of high register playing, so it's like an endurance test. You're going to make it 3 groups to rotate over 3 days, so you evenly distribute those groups across 3 days. So if there are 8 lyrical excerpts, you practice, 3-3-2. If there are 9 technical excerpts, you practice 3 technical excerpts each day. So you're just making everything even, that you're not favoring one thing to be practiced over another thing. And I actually have this on my website, a practice planner where I kind of wrote this out in one page.
We'll have to share that.
davidbender.net or something. What is it? Did I nail it?
Yes, .net, and it's under my downloads. I made it
I check the website every night, so.
That was about the creepiest response you could have. Just,
I wasn't expecting that one.
So you distribute that. I start about 8 or 7 weeks before, and you take everything half tempo, and you spend about 9 days at half tempo. Because it's groups of 3, I'm going to say everything divisible by 3. So I spend like 9 days at half tempo, and then maybe 6 days at 60% tempo. It's just a very slow way of increasing the tempo. And you only need to do, for me, like 10 minutes per excerpt. So if you're doing 8 or 9 excerpts a day, it's about 2 hours with breaks. Oh, and every day you're doing it in a random order. About halfway through, I shuffle the days so that everything's random. It's just a way of being that you slowly get ready. You bring everything up to tempo, and you do it all very randomly, so that on the day of the audition, you're not more used to playing. Well, I always start with tuba mirum, and because then it kind of warms me up, and then I can play bolero. Well, I can't play organ symphony right after bolero because I'm too tight. Well, if I play Bruckner 7 right before I have to play Ride of the Valkyries, like I'm too tired, so I'm not going to do that in my practice session. Ideally, when you audition for an orchestra, they make the list in a way that will make the candidate most successful, but not that sometimes they try to make the list so the candidate is least successful. So you have to be ready for anything, and it's essentially just a way of being ready for anything because you've practiced everything in every way.
I have a question and a comment.
Sure.
Do you also do that with dynamics? Do you, like, if something's soft, do you bring it up in dynamic to make it more comfortable, or if it's really loud, do you bring it down in dynamic? I mean, is that also part of the building up process?
I've never done that. I've never done that methodically. Maybe just in a day if I'm like, wow.
You don't need to swing for the
symphony.
fences all the time, right?
Yeah, or organ symphony's not feeling good. Let me just play it loud once to like get it flowing.
Sure.
That's an interesting idea though.
All right,
to bring
go
it
update
down.
that website. Come on.
The Nick Schwartz asterisk.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. I'll take it. I'll take a cut. And so the comment was, you said kind of in passing, which is meant to be in passing, that all this preparation each day takes maybe about 2 hours with breaks. So if you started with that comment, oh, you're going to practice your excerpt for 2 hours a day, I think that can be daunting for people. But then if you start like how you did, it only takes me 8-9 minutes per excerpt, maybe 10. It's really not a whole lot per one.
Oh, yeah.
And so I teach this way too, and I practice this way. I love breaking things down into small digestible chunks like that, because then it adds up to something much bigger rather than I need to play 3 hours a day,
Right. And if you have a list that's, let's say 30, I've been finding 30 excerpts is a pretty typical on a list. If you start 2 months in advance, you don't need to play everything every day. That's why if you only play 10 excerpts a day, you're fine.
Right.
You're going to remember, 2 days later. And actually it goes by quick, because sometimes if my chops feel tired, or if I have a weird travel day and I have to miss a day and you're 1 day behind, you're only 1 day until you have to redo the third day. You know what I mean? 3 days is actually a pretty fast fast schedule cycle. Yeah. Yeah. I only do 10 minutes per excerpt essentially. And if you do 10 a day with breaks, 100 minutes, but really it's about 2 hours.
Well,
now I do other stuff. I do a little bit of fundamental practicing usually. Definitely at the beginning of my excerpt preparation, I make sure to keep practicing fundamentals. Maybe toward the end, if I'm ramping up, I can bring that down a little. But
yeah, you stole something from me. I'm going to steal something from you. I like this whole plan. This is nice.
Yeah, it's a good way to stay balanced.
I'll email you, Nick.
Well, I think we should share on our social medias your little plan there. And
sure, I'll have to make sure it looks good.
It's not written in crayon or something.
Right.
No, I think that it's a really good way. It doesn't even have to be excerpts. It could be, you could apply this to your recital. You could apply this to so many things
sure.
or just your weekly lessons. Just sitting down with, okay, I have these etudes. Okay, how much time do I need to dedicate per day that I'm both covering my bases and also not burning out,
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's pop psychology, but so many like people talking about peak performance and kind of a common thing is small amounts of progress very consistently.
Right.
It's way easier than trying to do everything at once, and it gets you to a higher level than you would be otherwise at the end of the process.
Yeah, and half the problem sometimes is just purely logistics, is just being prepared, feeling prepared, not feeling like you neglected something, and making a long methodical process like this where you can actually even document. I'm sure you document what you worked on that day. And
what I do is I write a little calendar and I check marks on this one piece of paper. Actually, you'll see what I mean.
Cool. So the audition happens. Were you feeling pretty good throughout the day? What was it? A surprise?
Well, so that audition, if I remember, I flew from Helsinki to Chicago on a Sunday, and I picked up my car from my parents' house in Chicago. I had a lesson with Mulcahy on Monday. Just played through his stuff and also played some excerpts in the studio class. He's great. He lets alumni sometimes come back and play. So it was like 6 p.m. on Monday night when I started driving to Detroit. I knew I was only going to drive like halfway because also I'm jet lagged at this time, because it's 6 p.m. It's like 1 a.m. in Helsinki. So I drove halfway. I had requested to go late on Tuesday. So the personnel manager put me as like the second to last person to go. So I drove another halfway. And Tuesday morning, I got to Detroit in the middle of the day. And, you show up, you warm up. My first round, I think, was okay. It felt normal to me, which is always my goal, to feel like you just play at your normal level. I was told I was advanced, but because I was also last in the second round, so I had to wait till like 9 p.m. to play. So at this point, I'm getting kind of tired, like sleepy. So I do remember kind of a funny story that while I was waiting in my warm-up room for my semifinal round, I fell asleep because I was so jet lagged. I was like took a nap for an hour, which actually was nice. I certainly didn't feel like super nervous or excited. Not, like excitable. I wasn't so jacked up. I was kind of sleepy, actually. So then my second round was also okay. I remember they asked me to play some stuff again because I'm, rushing or whatever, but it was okay. And then I was the only one advanced to the finals, which was the next day.
How long have you been in the Detroit Symphony now?
This, I don't know if it counts, but this is my 6th year. My 6th season.
Well, I mean, it feels like time has stopped
because
we've
we've missed so much of stuff. But I joined in September of 15,
and it was funny because we've gotten to play there a couple of times now. I'm trying to remember? Did I first meet you? Was it at the retreat or was it when we played together?
No, Sebastian. I've told you this story many times. We first met when I cold called you when I was visiting Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's right. And we hung out.
Yeah, because I got your number from Jeremy. I
was flattered.
And I was like, hey, I'm, friend of a friend, trombone. Let's be friends.
Didn't we go to some random party?
I think so, yeah.
There was like foam or something. There's something.
I don't know. It's a Pittsburgh thing.
Yeah. And it was funny because like Ken Tompkins wanted you to focus on your position during your tenure process, and so when I was called to sub, I was playing principal, which was interesting because you were like the member of the orchestra, and it was like my first time playing. But you were incredibly cordial and nice, and we had fun. I think that was like a children's program that just had a bunch of big hits on it.
Yeah, that's how we do those kids programs in the D.
Oh, the 313. So we've had you to the retreat 3 times. Is that right? You came once in 2016, like briefly as like a guest, and then 2017 you came as guest faculty. Then
this summer
you were also.
Oh yeah. Okay. If we're counting this summer.
Why doesn't it count? It has to count
because I didn't see you in person.
Oh, okay.
We felt you.
That's fair.
So
if we count this retreat, does that make David the all-time winner for the most? Or well,
no, that's a Jeff D question.
I think Jeff's only been twice.
Well,
he's been
online.
Yeah,
online.
He's been 3 times.
That's right.
So you guys need to have a battle royale.
Well, it's
like
funny because I
Thunderdome.
first met Jeff because he was subbing DSO a lot the year before he won Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so I guess for those who don't know, Jeff D is the bass trombonist of Pittsburgh Symphony and a frequent guest of the retreat and a wonderful human being like David.
I have a question. So reflecting on your years in the Detroit Symphony so far, and obviously very unique time right now, and first experiencing Randy Hawes as a teacher and then getting the opportunity to play with him professionally, just your thoughts on getting to work with him and his newly announced retirement.
Yeah, I mean, Randy's been a fantastic colleague this whole time. Back to my audition, after my final round in Detroit is always screened, and then they vote if you like qualify for the job. But if there's like more than one person, they might have a super final, and then they would take the screen down. But so my final round, there was a vote, and I was like qualified or something. I was the only one, but they made me still play a section round. So yeah, the section round happened, and then Randy was like pretty special moment for us. as a student teacher and seeing each other then. And ever since then, it's been great. He has been professionally as a colleague, immediately, great level of respect and treating me as an equal, which, I could imagine like a horror story of a teacher still being the teacher, and that would not work in the professional setting. So, he's just been great. And obviously I learned a lot. I continued to learn a lot just by sitting next to him, as well as everyone else in the DSO. So as Sebastian alluded, he announced his retirement last year. Before the pandemic, it was like he was doing his paperwork in January. We were hiring subs in February, and then, then March happened. Yeah, it was bittersweet. Obviously, we were sad to see him go, but also it's great that he really went out on top, with no kind of deterioration in his playing ability. And it's a great time for him.
So one thing I wanted to make sure to get in there is during this pandemic, you started an exciting venture that I think you've been thinking about for a while, and then you decided no time greater than the present. Can you tell us about your new business that you've started?
Yeah, so I started a audio and video mobile recording business called Prestige Recording Services that I'm focusing on what I would say any acoustic music. So I don't really have the equipment for like rock and roll, but like classical, jazz, folk, on-site recording. People ask me if it's a recording studio, and no, I don't have a studio. But if it's classical musicians, we know that we prefer to play in concert halls rather than a dry recording studio. So I audio engineer recordings for people. I've only started doing it for people other than myself a few months ago, and I've already had some great clients and great projects completed.
Yeah, and I was there somewhat recent, or very recently actually, and you showed me all your gear and played some recordings, and you're obviously set up for really excellent recording and have deep knowledge of this and a passion for it. So, I think that we're, other than hearing about you as a great trombonist, I think we're going to hear more about you as a AV guy.
Perhaps.
And speaking of which, I want to ask you about one thing, and then I have a few quick questions, and then I have a special request. So with your recording, you did a really cool project that I really admire. You really did a good deep dive in trombone repertoire with chamber music, with string quartets, was it also percussion? You got a grant to record this repertoire, and you made these amazing videos that are on your website. Could you talk a little about that? Sure.
So the broad strokes let me just go over the chronology a little bit differently. So I applied for a grant. This wonderful organization, the Kresge, administered by the Kresge Foundation, which, if you guys know Kmart, that's Kresge Mart. So the Kresge Foundation is a huge, philanthropic organization across the Midwest. And Kresge Arts in Detroit awards these fantastic grants to artists in the city every year. Disciplines rotate throughout every 2 years. So music came up. I just applied kind of on a whim, and kind of with the idea that, I would love to play, rather than just trombone and piano recitals, trombone with chamber ensemble recitals. So I wrote the grant application for that purpose and explained how the concerts would work and how I hoped to impact the city and the arts environment, as well as the community in the city. And I was very fortunate to be awarded the grant. And so because of that, I was able to organize and perform these concerts. I had a recital with string quartet. I had another recital with organ. At the same time, I did a lot of master classes with my wife, Tiffany, on piano. So it was a very busy year. In 2018, I think I played 6 recitals in 3 weeks of three different programs.
Wow, that's busy.
So those are the videos. Those videos are from that. And so those recordings, I would call that was my beta, my beta testing. And I have a much different setup now. So if I could go back, everything would be completely different. But it was okay for archival purposes.
Well, there's a lot of fantastic repertoire out there that not many trombonists perform.
Yeah, the string quartet stuff. I was like calling composers, checking, doing research on websites. It was difficult to find, because it's not on so many people's CDs, as was, I think, a lot of maybe CD or Spotify or whatever. A lot of the way that I find music that I like for trombone and piano is because people have already recorded it. You can listen to famous trombonist CD and hear something you like, and then you want to play it. This music that I was trying to play had never been recorded before. I didn't commission it, but it had never been recorded before, so it was a little more difficult to find. So that was a little bit of a task, but it was great. And I have some clips on my website and my YouTube of those performances.
We want to try something new with you that we haven't done before. And this is going to go from the stupid to maybe a little more in depth. But just a few quick questions to get your instant lightning opinion on. Okay. Some of these are really dumb, but we came up with them. Thayer valve, rotor valve.
Rotor.
Okay. Your least favorite and your favorite piece to play, either solo or orchestral.
I really like playing Mahler 3, but not the solo part. I play second trombone now. I played it at the Tetons on second also, but I love the sixth movement of Mahler 3, which, some people might not get to. Beautiful, beautiful chorales. I love, and that's such a journey. And everyone talks about the chorale in Mahler 2. I actually like Mahler 3 a little bit better.
Hot take.
So let's call that my favorite. Solo piano. Let's say like typical repertoire stuff. If I could play it better, I would love playing the Creston, but it's so hard that I don't.
String players hate that too.
Oh, no
Have you
doubt.
ever talked to a string player?
Ever talk to a pianist?
Oh God.
I'm sure they all hate it, but if I could play it a little bit better, that would be my favorite. Least favorite, you know what? I have love for all the trombone rep. I used to think that the Rimsky-Korsakov was really stupid, but then I just kind of fooled around with it, and I was like, it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Maybe I should ask most overrated, but that's tricky too.
Most overrated? Well, that's tricky. I think something that is played as something, if people could make a little bit more effort with looking for repertoire, is the Sulek Sonata. The Sulek Sonata is awesome.
Schulich.
The Stepchan Sulek Sonata is a great piece, but I think a lot of people, myself included, when I played at my sophomore year recital, you could go find something a little bit different and get the same result. But I think because so many famous people have recorded it, it's become so standard. But I still love it. I mean, it's a great piece, but maybe slightly overrated.
All right. Yamaha trombone teen or super slick?
Yamaha.
Okay, that's the correct answer. This might go along with your previous answer, but do you have one concert experience that was just overall the most meaningful, most memorable?
The first time I played with Chicago Symphony, it was the most memorable because I was actually while it was happening, I was telling myself to memorize it. It was with Charles Dutoit, and we're playing Ravel and Debussy, and the Due to You cello concerto, which only has 2 trombones. I was playing second, and
I believe it's Due to Luke's.
The Tiliux.
Right. Thanks, guys. So I was, that was when I was a senior at Northwestern. I really, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to memorize the experience, so I do remember it pretty well.
Is fifth position real?
Yes, of course. I play all my low A naturals in the valve in fifth position.
Hot take.
And last question for me, something you would tell your 18-year-old self.
When I was 18, just that your question is just a coincidence. When I was 18, I did develop a slight problem in my playing. And when becoming a freshman at Northwestern, I tried to hide it from my teachers because, I was trying to impress them or impress my other student colleagues. So I never asked them about it, and I just kind of tried to fix it on my own. It ended up becoming a bigger problem. So when I was 18, if I could go back and tell myself, would be try to fix it before it became more of an issue.
This is a question I like to ask. What do you think trombonists and musicians in general could do more of that they don't do enough of?
I would say if I had to completely generalize and take a guess, I would guess that most young musicians do not listen to solo music of other instruments. So, since the last couple of years, I really like listening to trumpet solo music. I know that might be sacrilegious to say.
Can you give a couple recommendations just along those lines?
Well, I mean, obviously Håkan Hardenberger jumps
amazing.
out, but there's something really good trumpet sound is really special to me. And the way that the articulation kind of pops out, I try to sometimes play trombone a little bit more like a trumpet rather than a tuba, but that's a digression. But I like listening to solo CD by Albrecht Meyer, principal oboe of Berlin Phil. I listen to Emmanuel Paoud, principal flute. I just think that we spend so much time, trombonists or whomever, spend so much time, listening to your instrument solo CDs that you miss out on a lot of other great things. And you can sometimes hear special qualities that are kind of normal on another instrument. Like I mentioned, the articulation of a trumpet that you can try to maybe bring into your trombone playing or the playing of your instrument.
Speaking of appreciating other solo instruments, a little known talent that David Bender has is he's quite the banjo player.
Banjoist?
Banjoist. Is there any possibility there's a banjo in the room right now and he does not know that?
I know it is. It's directly to his left.
Yeah, it's
Is it there?
2 feet away from me, actually.
Is there any chance we could get you to play us out?
Yeah,
a little David Bender special.
We might need a few takes.
I guarantee you there is 0 banjists listening to this, so you can, pluck your
I have
heart
not
out.
practiced for like 6 years.
Oh, perfect. That's not true.
Is this gonna be like the Anchorman scene? Like, oh, I'm totally unprepared, and then like you just pull the
pulls
banjo
it
out
out of his sleeve.
Hold on.
I'm so glad it's in the room. Oh, hear the case sounds.
Clickety
play by play.
clack.
Clickety clack, the banjo.
Clickety clack, the banjo's back.
I don't know about any trombone and banjo pieces, but we need to make that happen. David can't hear us right now, so we're just giving commentary. Watch him spend like 20 minutes tuning.
You guys should be paying me extra for this.
Oh, we are. We're paying you. We'll pay you as much money as we make from this episode.
Right. Double what you're paying me now.
Hey, well, let's triple it while we're at it.
That's very generous. Wait, I'm not exaggerating. I like barely practiced, so I forgot.
Here comes it's the setup. Classic
Let me
Bender
tune,
setup.
okay? Can I tune first?
Told you you would.
This isn't like a flute. You just pull it out of your shirt pocket.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy right now.
Well, I've played banjo since I was in 8th grade, and I think in high school I was probably better at banjo than I was at trombone, and I have not gotten any better since then. And I started listening to Bela Fleck, and I thought it was really awesome. In Chicago, there's the Old Town School of Folk Music, and I just started taking group lessons there and took it from that. Okay, so I'll play you the first song I ever learned, which I think is the only song that I still remember how to play.
David Bender, thank you so much for joining us.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
I imagine your 80-year-old self just sitting on your porch all day doing that.
It's funny. I used to tell people that not many people know this about me, but now I can't say that anymore.
Oh, I had this set up.
Yeah.
I know that was on your little notes all the way at the bottom with an underline.
I bet you don't know that my first instrument, the banjo. I bet you don't know this. My first instrument was the guitar, David.
That's wonderful. I have a guitar right next to me also.
Well, the only song I remember how to play kind of is La Bamba.
Bamba.
I just got that down basically.
Nick, I'm pretty sure that's a one chord song. So.
I wasn't playing chords. I was playing. I was like
You're playing
8
single
years
notes.
old.
Do 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 do.
You know what?
Do 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 do.
I didn't say I was good at it. I said my first instrument.
Did you ever see the La Bamba movie?
Yeah.
Oh, with
So I was
Tragic.
Lou Diamond
Phillips.
Yeah.
I was at a bar in Fort Worth once, hanging out with some friends. It was this big outdoor bar. There's a band playing on stage. They took a break, and they came back, and I noticed Lou Diamond Phillips was like at the next table. And we'll just say he'd been drinking a little bit, and the band went up to him and said, "Hey, will you sing La Bamba with us?" And you would have to expect he'd be annoyed by that question, but he was just like all about it and all into it. And of course, he lip synced in the movie, but he went up there like super drunk and sang La Bamba. It was the coolest, just random experience. He sounded great too.
Nice.
You know, Sebastian, I think I say this with every guest, but I love me some David Binder.
I know, man. He's a good dude. He's
very down to earth.
He's one of those just proper Northwestern kids. He's got just this refined, beautiful sound. Nice little Midwestern boy. Always well dressed.
Clean cut. Looks like he's about to give a press conference on Martha's Vineyard.
I bet he has, knowing him.
He might have. Yeah, so I thought it was a really awesome interview. I really enjoy hearing, I enjoy hearing everyone talk about how they got from where they came from to where they're going. And, this was no exception to that. And he had, a lot of success at a relatively young age, considering that he won a job overseas and got to live that experience. And it's just, of course, we knew all this, but it's interesting, I think, to hear it again and also fresh for our listeners. So I think it was really fun to revisit that with him.
Yeah, he always stayed very focused. He was very privileged to have such amazing teachers the whole way from high school and experiences in Chicago to Northwestern, and then going to Europe and studying with. He's very opportunistic, always finding someone to play for, always taking lessons, always learning. I mean, it's no surprise he's found such success at a young age.
Yeah, I particularly enjoyed hearing his regiment for auditioning. I think that everyone should have a routine, a daily routine, obviously, but what I mean here is a routine for something like an audition. And you could apply what he's talking about to recitals, to even your lessons on a more micro level. But that idea of really planning ahead and really having a rigorous schedule, I think, is something that we should all take away from him and, the other guests that have said their versions of that. But it's always good to kind of collect as much information as you can from someone who's been successful and grab little bits and pieces from everyone and apply it to yourself in the way that works best for you.
Yeah, and you'll see with all the people we talk to, especially, the orchestral people that won auditions, their plans may differ. They have different strategies. They have different opinions on how to prepare, especially knowing themselves what works best for them. But they all have a plan. Yeah,
I think that's the tie that binds, so to speak, is that they've put some energy into the planning process, not just the practicing part, but away from the horn, using the other side of your brain, the more concrete planning, organizing sort of process rather than the creative side of our brain. And I think you need both. I think the more that you do that stuff, the planning ahead, it allows you to be more creative in the end because you have taken care of everything. And it's like, just for example, off the top of my head, okay, at 2 p.m., I know I'm going to be practicing X, Y, and Z. So you don't even have to think about it when you enter the room. You've planned it. And so I think that, anyone who hasn't done this, and again, I'm not saying that you should do it exactly like David did, but you have to start somewhere. And maybe you could take David's plan to start with and apply it to yourself for a month and see where you are. It could be just for your lessons or for your personal practice, but keep a practice journal, plan your sessions for a week out. I used to do this in college. And when I really got serious about that, that's when I really saw my playing grow. And the other thing is he was talking about, he put in 2 hours, and we spoke about this on the podcast together, that he put in maybe 2 hours of practice on excerpts in a day, but you break it down and you're spending 10 minutes per excerpt. It really, when you break it down, these digestible chunks, it not only is better, I think, for productivity because it's these really hyper focused 10 minutes of time, but also you cover more in 10 minutes focused than just going in in taking 10 minutes to figure out what you're going to play by noodling around, you know?
Oh, yeah. And we know how in this world we're surrounded by distractions. So forget your phone for a second, but just the second you start practicing something and get fixated on one thing, or one thing's not working and you want to just really start working on this thing, and all of a sudden you've spent 45 minutes on one excerpt and you have a whole list to prepare. It's that kind of organized self-discipline that gets you to the audition feeling confident because you know you prepared, you know you covered everything, that you know there's not some excerpt you're hoping they don't ask for.
If you have it on your schedule and you really hold to the schedule, okay, at 2 p.m. today, I'm going to work on William Tell. You're kind of making a deal with yourself that hopefully you don't break. I mean, it's really up to you in the end, but I think having the structure in front of you really helps you follow through on your goals.
And this is where we are now. I mean, these people are competing, depending on the job, for a livelihood, for a life, to something to build a family around. You know, it's the person that really puts their heart into it and makes it their job to prepare for this thing is, you know, going to have the best chance. Because at the end, you know, we can all attest, like, when you get to an audition, there's a lot of people capable of doing the job at the end. There's a lot of really talented people that will be in the finals, but who's going to have that one special day? Who's going to be there 100% that day and say something special? I mean, that's what you're hoping for. You want to give yourself the best opportunity to be that person.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this applies to every opportunity that one could take. It could be a small regional orchestra. It could be, you know, the Chicago Symphony. And it really doesn't matter in the end because, hey, you could audition for a small regional orchestra, you know, somewhere, doesn't matter where. And suddenly that opportunity, if you win it, if you win the job, suddenly you get more opportunities. And you, before you know it, you're kind of built into this scene. And so you never know what even maybe small opportunity could be the seed that grows into a career. Just like one thing leads to another. And so, you know, I'm saying this because I feel like some people have the attitude of like, oh, well, this is a huge audition, I got to prepare extra hard. I don't think that's the way you do it. You know, I think that every time you put yourself out there in a competitive environment, like an audition or a competition, whatever it may be, but you want to put your best foot forward, it's more about the path on how you get there, the routine of practicing, how you're going to practice for everything. And if you have a standard and you have not just a standard of excellence, but a kind of a standard way that you prepare for anything that you're doing, I think that just sets you up for success. And also when that big audition comes along, you've already implemented this system. So you know how it's going to work. You know how you're going to get into that practice mode and that really excellent level that is hard to achieve.
As John Kitzman always told me, getting better at the trombone is a marathon, not a sprint. And Sebastian, you're a sprinter.
Yeah, I think I've heard similar things from teachers before.
So we have a question, Nick.
Oh my goodness.
So this question comes from David Lingle. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So I posted something on our Instagram. Sometimes I see some really interesting posts about psychology that I like to post, and this one seemed pretty relevant to our lives. And it was about imposter syndrome, and it was related to the talk we had with Amanda, so I thought it was pretty relevant. I think it's something I've experienced before I even knew that there was a word for it.
Sure.
And so this post actually kind of defines it in an interesting way. It's just it's like a circle pie chart, and it says the cycle of imposter syndrome. So it starts with 1, a specific task causes anxiety and self-doubt. For example, being invited to be a speaker at an event. The next level is it results in either over-preparing or procrastination. For example, spending hours researching or avoidance. The next step would be after the event, you discount positive feedback from the audience. For example, minimizing the praise given. I think we've all done that. And lastly, you have a fear of being exposed as a fraud. And so they say some contributing factors is depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, perfectionism. And so David wrote a really thoughtful question, and he said, how can one cut out imposter syndrome without overdeveloping their ego? I think a lot of times we associate any sort of, self-love or confidence with ego, or that you can't have one or the other.
Well, especially I think for men in society too, we're generally speaking not supposed to have feelings of care and self-worth, generally speaking. And luckily society is changing their views on this, that, it's okay if men cry, it's okay if men have intense emotions. And so that goes along with the idea.
Nick cries for me every night.
I do. I just know, I know that we look at the same moon, and that gives me calm and peace.
It's like, oh, it's 9:00. Time for Nick tears. You're like giving a thoughtful answer.
Thanks. No, but that goes along with the, idea of self-care, self-worth. I think it is tied together.
Yeah. And obviously we're not psychologists, but we've felt these things before. And, I think there's a line, and it's not an either or thing where you either need to be really self-deprecating and only focused on what you do wrong all the time, or you're an egomaniac. I think the ideal is being someone that is aware of where you are, is aware of what you do well, is confident in your abilities, and you believe in yourself in the moment, but you're also humble enough to know that you don't know everything and that you can still learn and you can still absorb new information. But thinking that you need to be almost not believing in the positive parts of yourself or your playing to get there is, I can attest from personal experience, that doesn't really work very well. And it doesn't make it very fun to play.
I think an important place to start from is to kind of have an analysis of if there was a scale of being an egomaniac and on the other side being absolutely self-deprecating about everything that you do, placing yourself on that scale to begin with. Where am I? Am I towards the ego part, or am I part of the scale, or am I more towards absolute self-deprecation, no matter how good it is what I'm doing, objectively good? And, once you kind of know where you're coming from, I think it's easy to know where you need to go. And I think that, first of all, I don't think it's set in stone. I think it moves. I think that in some moments, obviously we've had days where we play and go, you know what, I sound pretty darn good. And then the next day you play and it's like, my God, I should go back to school and ask for my money back. Because, it's so that's part of what we're dealing with is it's not a consistent thing that first of all, our emotions aren't consistent, and neither is our playing, and all that stuff's going to be tied together. So that's the first step, I would say. The second step is to, no matter what, like you were talking about, not accepting positive feedback. So my dad was a really great and thoughtful man. And one thing that really bugged him, and it's now bugs me, is he really hated it when people said something nice to someone else and they shrugged it off and just said, oh, well, like I loved your performance. And you go, oh, it was okay. I chipped that note in the fourth bar of the second movement and I was out of tune, giving all these excuses of how it could be better. My dad, when that would happen, when I was a angsty teenager, he would say something nice to me, and I would, well, whatever, Dad. And he would go, no, you say thank you, even if you don't mean it in the moment. I think this is really important for multiple reasons. I'll tell kind of a story that goes along those lines. I played a performance at the retreat, and I was really genuinely unhappy with how I played. And I think it's okay.
I remember.
I'm generally unhappy with most of the time that I play, to be honest. This time I was very, very unhappy with how I played. And someone came up to me and they said, one of the students at the trombone retreat, and said, wow, great job, Nick. And I said thank you, but I said it in kind of oh, thank you. I did shrug it off a little bit, but I didn't complain or anything. But then that student came up to me later and talked to me and was talking about, oh, I really liked the way you played. I loved your vibrato, and I'd never heard this piece before. I bought it that night, and it made me realize that, number one, you don't know how your performance affects someone else. And
100%.
This is a huge part of performing is it's entertainment. It's art. It is good for the soul. It's good for the mind, all these things. And you don't know where someone else, where the listener is in their life. And you can really touch someone, even if you think you played terribly. And yes, we can do it better. But, you know, if you totally shut someone down in their compliment, it kind of puts a black cloud over the performance.
Absolutely.
And so this all being said, it kind of goes under fake it until you make it sort of thing. If you're really like a down person about your own playing and have a lot of negative self-talk, I think if you just practice the idea of saying to yourself, that was good. You know, when it is, maybe it's not where you want to be ultimately, but you are getting better. You played your etude better, your excerpt better, your solo better. You say to yourself, wow, good job. You really improved. Even if you don't really feel that, I think if you start building that self-talk and external talk to responding to compliments by just saying, oh, thank you, that means a lot. Even if you don't mean it at first, I think over time, your inner monologue will change and you'll have more appreciation for playing for an audience and that kind of sacred relationship.
Yeah, and that inner monologue is the thing that we're fighting, right? But yeah, I love what you said, and that's such an important lesson, and we're all guilty of it. It's like, you feel like if someone compliments you after something that you did that you hated, you feel like if I acknowledge it, it means I think I'm good, or if I think that was good. You know, it's a perfect lesson. It's not about you. It's about their experience. If a little old lady comes up to you and they connected with something that you don't even know what they're feeling or connecting, and they enjoyed it, let them enjoy it. It puts such a damper on it if you're like, thanks.
Yeah,
you know?
or worse, if you say, oh, you know, like, I played it better. It's like,
right.
It comes, you don't mean to, but it really is a little condescending. It's like that their opinion isn't as valued as yours. So even though
exactly.
the intent is to self-deprecate, you come across as more egotistical in a way, because you're saying their opinion doesn't matter as much as yours, and your opinion is more sophisticated than theirs. So it kind of has a double-edged sword.
Right. And to get back to the question, you know, I think it depends on you, and there's a danger in each end of the spectrum. If, you know, ask yourself, if you're only telling yourself you sound great all the time for self-preservation, that could be dangerous because you might not ever be open to getting better. If you're constantly only focused on negative things, you're never going to appreciate and do in the moment all the good things you're doing. So I think a healthy balance of both. And what the University of Waterloo Center for Teaching Excellence identifies strategies that can help combat imposter syndrome. A few things: talk about it, recognize that thoughts, feelings aren't facts, accentuate the positive, recognize that it's okay to make mistakes and ask others for help, monitor and alter negative self-talk, imagine positive outcomes rather than the worst case scenarios, recognize and reward your accomplishments, strengths on a daily basis.
Just one more thought along these lines is this is something I do with all new students, is when they play something, I'll say, and I do this not just new students, but all my students, but one of the first things I do is they come in and play, and I'll say, what went well, what didn't go well? And their response means a lot to me. And if they just say all the things that went poorly, that's not so great. If they said, oh, well, this went well, this one, it's like, okay, they're not being critical enough. So along with what you're saying is really run that self-diagnostic test.
Yeah, and I think as a teacher, you can do that too. You can always sense when someone's on either end of that spectrum, and you can clue them in to that kind of side.
And overall, just don't be a butthole.
Don't be a butthole. And if you enjoy the podcast, please consider leaving us a rating and review on iTunes. If you'd like to write a question for us or a topic for us to discuss, feel free. Follow us at Trombone Retreat on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and our website, tromboneretreat.com. Follow us on our new YouTube channel, Trombone Retreat. Also, feel free to shoot us an email at tromboneretreat@gmail.com, as we love hearing from you. You can also follow Nick at basstrombone444 on Instagram and me at js.vera on Instagram.
And as always, retreat yourself.